Hey guys, in this video, we will explore how our ancestors evolved from classical monkeys to modern-day humans and the key adaptations that led to these changes. We will also take a closer look at the differences between the traditional theory of human evolution and the current understanding based on recent scientific research. Furthermore, we will delve into the lives of Homo erectus, their communities, shelters, and hunting techniques. Finally, we will discover how Homo erectus evolved into Homo sapiens and the critical role that East Africa played in the evolution of modern humans. You will be surprised at how outdated the legendary picture of human evolution is. That's not how it was at all. In the last 50 years, the theory of evolution has been greatly revised due to new excavations, and our guest, Pithecanthropus Kushim, will help us understand it all. Well, we will start the video with the fact that the word Pithecanthropus itself is obsolete and is no longer used by scientists. Just as the theory of human evolution, with which you are probably familiar in general terms, is also not used. Traditional textbooks tell a simple scheme. First there were apes, and then with each new species their backs became straighter, which eventually led to the emergence of human reason. The famous picture and theory provoke a flurry of various criticisms. If this is true, then why don't all apes evolve, and why don't we see chimpanzees getting smarter in front of us? You'd be surprised, but there are answers to all of these questions, just that they are of interest to professional anthropologists and scientists. These guys have had a long time to make fun of the classical theory of evolution and put together a correct version of it. In short, it went something like this. About 20 million years ago, predominantly in Africa, our true ancestors lived. They were classical monkeys with a cranial volume like that of modern chimpanzees and lived the vast majority of their lives in trees. After all, the Earth was very different. Tropical forests were rampant all over Africa and even Europe and the Transcaucasia. Everything was going their way until the climate began to change. About 15 million years ago, Africa became drier, especially in its eastern part. There were fewer forests, and it was here that our path with the apes diverged. In the West, nature was still raging, and the monkeys didn't have to change. They lived peacefully and eventually evolved into their current individuals. While in the East, the disco began. There were fewer and fewer forests, and monkeys increasingly came down to Earth, making their way to the next trees. And eventually there were no trees at all. East Africa became savanna. Of course, a huge part of the monkeys died or migrated to the West, but some remained. Those that adapted to permanent life on Earth became our ancestors. They were still apes, but they learned how to get food, shelter from predators, and live on flat land. Generations changed, and in order to get around on the ground, they became a little straighter. Thus were born Australopithecines, such as the famous Lucy found in Ethiopia. Anthropologists estimate that Lucy lived 3 million years ago. She was 105 centimeters tall and weighed 27 kilograms. At the moment of her death, she was about 25 years old, and she died after falling from the height. The volume of the lady's brain did not reach 400 cubic centimeters, which is about 3 times less than you and me. Lucy's skeleton was 40% intact, allowing scientists to clearly say that she was our distant ancestor. Such Australopithecines became accustomed to life without trees, and a few million years later, accumulating knowledge and passing it on to their descendants, gave birth to a new species. It was called Homo habilis, which translates as handyman. These guys had densely forgotten what trees were. But thanks to the constant need to survive, the knowledge passed on generation after generation increased their brain size by half. It is these successors of Australopithecus that scientists already call humans. Because of teachability, further evolution accelerated, and after several 100,000 years, Homo habilis finally changed, dispersed over large territories, and turned into what scientists call Homo erectus. Actually, this is where our Kushim belongs, being a Pithecanthropus. Initially, there was a small mistake, which for some reason made its way into all textbooks under the guise of fact. Eugene Dubois, finding remains in Indonesia in 1891 and calling them Pithecanthropus, almost immediately changed his mind. Because in subsequent years, a whole mountain of similar remains were found all over the planet, and it was quickly discovered that the Pithecanthropus is not a separate species of evolution. It is all the same Homo erectus, which translates as upright man. The difference between the remains from Indonesia, Africa, and Britain is minimal. But despite the fact that scientists quickly stopped using the term Pithecanthropus, in the broad masses it caught on, which from the point of view of science is not correct. And our Kushim, the Pithecanthropus, is correctly referred to as upright man. It lives in Indonesia, although, as we have already mentioned, relatives of Kushim settled almost all over the world. Due to the fact that the ancestors of Australopithecus had boosted their intelligence, the size of our Kushim's cranium is 1,000 cubic centimeters, which is almost similar to that of modern humans. He is 1.5 meters tall, and his skeleton, as it is clear from the name of the species, is completely straight. Moreover, the femur is completely similar to modern humans, and Kushim does not have even the slightest recollection of life in trees. It is about 500,000 year BC, and Kushim's life is already remotely similar to human life. Our hero lives in a small community of 30 individuals. It was formed long before the birth of our boy, because the planet is not a friendly place and it's much easier to defend themselves from predators together. Pithecanthropus already understood the meaning of collective labor. Moreover, even a small community town was not temporary. Homo erectus successfully built permanent shelters where they lived for a long time. Our Kushim is a smart guy and is engaged in making stone tools. Spears, axes, and semblances of shovels were commonplace at this stage of evolution, and not so new. Some excavations have found stone implements as old as 700,000 years. Almost all of the Kushim's life, apart from their craft, is a search for sustenance. Strong evidence has been found that Homo erectus hunted large animals 500,000 years ago. Rhinoceroses, elephants, hippos, and giraffes were often their victims. This, of course, meant teamwork. Already the first leaders had appeared, leading the settlements and telling them what to do. Moreover, at this stage, human ancestors were already taking care of each other. On the island of Java, the same anthropologist Dubois found an injured femur, meaning the Pithecanthropus was lame but somehow survived. Obviously, this was not possible without the help of congeners. The Georgian researcher Lord Kipanidze, in turn, found an elderly Homo erectus who raced for a long time without teeth, which means that he was helped by soft food and cared for. Even about hygiene, our Kushim and congeners already knew something. Bones and scraps are thrown away, and the dead are buried, subconsciously understanding the danger of infections. True, no rituals had been invented yet. Homo erectus was not very good at thinking abstractly. Nevertheless, there is nothing wrong with practical thinking. Kushim knew how to make fire with silicon and even cook food with it. And evidence has also been found that Pithecanthropus ate various kinds of grasses outside of starvation conditions. So the guys had some idea about vitamins, healing, and health. True, under conditions of starvation, Homo erectus did not disdain cannibalism and even beat each other to death. By the way, they also did this during ordinary fights. The social life of mankind was already incipient. For a long time, it was thought that our Kushim and his relatives later evolved into Neanderthals, but everything is much more complicated. Pithecanthropus, aka Homo erectus, actually evolved into us, that is, Homo sapiens. It happened in good old East Africa, where evolution was ahead of other regions. Somewhere around 200,000 years ago, our direct ancestors sprouted and began to look at new territories. Thus, Homo sapiens made their way even as far as Australia, periodically encountering stunted Pithecanthropus and other branches of evolution. Neanderthals were long thought to be intermediate between Homo erectus and Homo sapiens, but modern research has shown that this is not the case. The origins of Neanderthals are still shrouded in mystery. However, scientists have clearly agreed that they are not our direct relatives. They are Homo sapiens, who traveled around the world, displaced Neanderthals due to their intellectual superiority, and actually became known as Cro-Magnon men about 30,000 years ago, finally conquering Europe. This is exactly how, according to the latest research, the evolutionary chain that led to the funny pictures of kittens on the internet looks like. We hope you discovered something new with our Kushim, who, unlike Neanderthals, was our ancestor. However, there were mountains of humanoid individuals and parallel branches of development walking around the planet, some of which have survived to the present day. Would you like to see a video about them? Leave your wishes in the comments and we will definitely continue. Well, that's all for now. See you all again, Pithecanthropus.